Hello, we'd like to welcome you to the Introduction to Parent Participation webinar that's been run by Contact a Family today. If there is a technical hitch, can you please bear with us? We're working remotely from Contact a Family and it is possible that things will go wrong, so bear with us and we'll try and put things right as quickly as we can. So those of you that are joining us today by PC, laptop, tablet or smartphone should hopefully be able to see the slides on your screen. Because there are quite a few people who are attending the webinar today, it's not practical for questions to be asked throughout, so you will be put into a mute mode. If you do have any questions, please use the question icon in the toolbar on your screen. If you type in the questions there and submit them to the administrator, then they'll be sent through to us, and at the end of the session we will answer as many as we can. If there are further questions, or if we think that any questions that are posed require more detail to go into than our time allows, then we will put them together on a Q&A document that will go online along with both the copy of this webinar and the PowerPoint, and also a number of handouts that we will refer to throughout the presentation. And at the end of the webinar there'll be a short questionnaire that will launch, and if you could take the time to complete this and provide some feedback on the session, that will really help Contact a Family in terms of setting up their webinars in future. So some quick introductions. I'm Sharon. I'm a Contact a Family associate, and I was also the previous chair of the Hampshire Parent Carer Network as well. Just to explain, I've got a bit of a cold, so if I start having a coughing fit, I'm going to hand over to my colleague.
Hi, I'm Gonya Saunders, and here with the water in case Sharon needs it. I'm from West Sussex Parent Carer Forum. I was co-chair for approximately 2 years, and I now lead on working with health partners in the forum there.
So the purpose of this session, really we wanted to look at what participation is, look at the role of a Parent Carer Forum, identify some opportunities and some ideas of how you can get involved with the work that your local authority and health body are doing, and how you can be strategic in your approach. We also want to look at the role of the parent representative, how to use evidence to inform your practice, and then at the end we'll also be talking about how to look after the most valuable assets of the forum, which is yourselves. And then hopefully at the end you'll be able to reflect on your own experiences and how your forum works, and then improve participation locally. So we want to start just introducing the concept of the ladder of participation, where there's a number of different ways that you can interact with the local authority or health body. And we're going to take you through just an example to illustrate how this ladder of participation works.
So the ladder of participation and the ways professionals and service users, for want of a better word, can work. It is a really old concept. It's been around in the social care world for a long time, since 1969. And locally in our area, we were asked as a forum to talk to Senkos and talk about the difference between working in consultation and co-production, for example. So myself and another colleague in West Sussex Parent Care Forum came up with this analogy of a wedding, because that's not offensive and everyone can relate to being at a wedding, and it also shows the distinction between the different steps and rungs up the ladder. So if I just talk you through this example, information can feel like you're told about a wedding. You might read about it in a newspaper, you might hear about it, at a bus stop, or you may not even hear about it at all. So from a parent's point of view, it was just making sure that professionals realise that they need to make sure that information can be understood by people, by the readers, or that they even receive it at all. And that's what we mean by information, very one way. So, other way, consultation. And that very much feels like, hooray, you receive an invitation to the wedding. That's a really great feeling. You're definitely going to go out and buy some new clothes potentially. But consultation can feel like, oh, you've actually been invited you're on the B list, you've been invited to the evening function of the wedding, so you've missed the main event. Afterthought in a way, you're definitely not the most important person. And the participation is that feeling where you receive an invitation to the wedding for the entire day. So you're there in the photographs, you celebrate the event, you eat all the wonderful food, and you're there for the evening do as well. But there's no necessarily longevity in participation. In contrast to co-production, thank you Sharon, where you are effectively at the top table, you're a wedding planner with the other professionals around the tables. You plan, you celebrate, and you share the wedding. You also share any disasters, you problem solve, you come up with solutions, and you share anniversaries of creating that event. So we use this analogy in West Sussex to talk to everybody about what we mean by co-production. Are you working in co-production? And that's what co-production should feel like. You were there from the start, and you plan, celebrate, and share the entire wedding.
Okay, so just to summarise really, and what we're going to do to explain again is, rather than the wedding analogy, Granya's also going to take you through a case study as well, step by step, of the different types of interaction. So the first type of interaction, as Grania explained, is where information is published. Services or organisations deliver information, and there's no interaction. It's very much a one-way delivery of information to parents.
So the particular example is documented on the Contact Family website. It was it's under the health pages, and at the end of this webinar you'll get directions to that, and you can go and read about it if you want to. But it's actually a fantastic GP surgery in Worthing, working in particular with parents of children who had disabilities or special educational needs. And information in the very beginning of the journey of this doctor's surgery, working well with that particular patient group, they had no information on parents as being carers. All the information about carers were directed at elderly people. So parents whose children had disabilities and special educational needs didn't realise that they were carers, and they weren't acknowledged any differently in the surgery. And also, similarly, GPs weren't really aware that these parents that they were seeing every day were carers either. So very one-way information, very misunderstood, and certainly not specific enough for the people that needed it.
So then the next stage that we talked about in the ladder is one of consultation. And this is where the service users are asked what they think about proposals that have already been pulled together without any service user involvement.
So going back to that GP surgery, the practice manager in the GP surgery realised that there were probably carers, parents who were carers out there who weren't getting having a very good relationship with the surgery, and that they could do better to support them. And they heard about a particular award. It's called the PACE Award. Again, it's all on the website. And the GP practice wanted to work differently using the principles that were in this particular award, which was about very good engagement and really understanding the issues that parents had in trying to have appointments with GPs and have good health provision for their young people. So they asked the forum to be involved in setting up talk and listen sessions with GPs, parents, young people where that was appropriate, and the forum effectively is as mediators to try and help in that consultation, to listen to all sides and understand why parent carers weren't having a tailored experience in that particular GP surgery.
So the next stage up is participation, and this is where services start to engage a little bit more earlier in the process. So rather than developing proposals and coming to the service users at the end, they actually start to engage earlier in the process to really understand their points of view and experiences.
And back to the GP surgery, after that consultation where they sent out survey monkeys and they had more face-to-face interaction and listened to parents, they could understand what the issues were. The GP service manager could understand what the issues were more closely for her GPs, but also really understood why many families didn't interact with GP surgery, avoided it actually, never made appointments, never highlighted they were carers, and just in sheer desperation went to A&E. And obviously that wasn't a good way forward for this GP surgery. So through participation, there was listening, understanding, and a way forward for both groups.
So co-production is where parents are involved pretty much from the beginning of a particular project and a particular piece of work. So they're also able to scope out the project and decide what the project's meant to be achieving, rather than coming into something that again has already been predetermined by the organisation that you're working with.
So that GP surgery knew that they had a foundation, they had a particular award which had a structure, but they didn't just want to implement that on its parent patient population, family population. So they acknowledged that they needed a working group which had to be parent carers who had that lived experience, who looked after children with disabilities, and they formed a very neutral, there were no preconceptions of what it would look like at the end in co-production. There were GPs, there were service practice managers, as well as parents, designing what they could do in that GP surgery to deliver a really positive experience, positive engagement for children and young people. And they implemented a whole host of very creative things which led to that particular GP practice having its award, which was great, the GP practice, but also fantastic engagement of parent carer families who have their health needs met in that GP surgery.
And the last stage, which is one that we haven't yet discussed, and actually recently it's only one that I've sort of come across, is a process of co-evaluation. And certainly in my experience at Hampshire, this is one of the things I think that certainly when I was involved we needed to be better at, which is when something has been delivered, is actually returning to it and evaluating it together to see actually has it met the outcomes, has it improved things for families, because that's what we're here for. Forums are here to make families' lives better. So actually going back and having a almost formal process where you work together to say, has it worked, or is there still further improvement, rather than ending a project when a particular service or support has been implemented.
And that's exactly what's happened in that wonderful example of that GP surgery, because they meet regularly, they reflect on what's working, what's not working, they change things to meet the need, and they evaluate the impact that the changes have made for both doctors, staff in the GP surgery, for young people, children and parents on the ground as well. So really nice example. I urge you to go and read.
Okay, so what is effective participation? Really, I think we've probably already talked about this and summarised it. It's where everybody's working together and everybody's valued and working in a team to shape and deliver services, where there are conversations that are taking place alongside professionals to design, develop and improve services, but mainly really to improve outcomes for local families with children with disabilities and additional needs. Okay, so we've got a few pictures here now just to illustrate, hopefully in a fun way, what we mean by effective participation. So we're going to take it in turns to go through the slides. So this first one is just saying, really, parents need to be involved at the very beginning. It's no good parent carers being involved partway through a project. We need everybody to come together in that lovely singing circle from the very beginning and work together.
And with effective participation, there are no secret squirrel conversations at the water cooler where not everyone is involved in. You know, so everything's very clear and very transparent, and you have the conversation with everyone all together. No one is left out.
And also this relates to the fact that parent carers should be involved with the whole meeting, not just parts of meetings where it's deemed appropriate by the local authority or health, that parent carers can come along to those bits. It really needs to be involved in all the discussions and all of the meetings. So the next one is just to demonstrate it shouldn't be about us versus them, it shouldn't be conflict, but it's actually about we instead and about working together.
And effective participation is keeping an open mind. Lovely picture of a donkey, thank you, Sharon. Maybe it's an ass, you know, don't assume anything about anybody. We all make assumptions, it's a natural human instinct, but just remember that making assumptions makes an ass out of you and me.
And it's also important to remember really that it also can sometimes just come down to having different perspectives and different understandings. So just because we see it from one particular way doesn't mean that we're necessarily in the right and the local authority or health are in the wrong. It's about coming together and actually going around and looking from it from the other side and seeing somebody else's perspective and then working together to come to a solution.
So I love the cartoons done by the lovely Graphics on the Go. Look at the website, his website, there's lots. And this just summarises what co-production should really mean. It's where you're valued as a parent carer with the same status, weight and equality with other professionals around the table in decision making. It's about working together, pooling resources, and those resources, it's not money. It's about your talents, gifts, strengths, your skills, your experience, seeing each other's point of view. You know, walking in my shoes is a good phrase to use at this point. But to get to that point of co-production, you need many, many ingredients. Just listed a long list on the right of the slide. You definitely need to build up trust. Sometimes it takes time. You need to build rapport, to have discussions, teamwork, compromise, make compromises at times, make relationships, communication. Couldn't stress that that's enough, not making assumptions about anything that you don't understand. Sometimes it's, I think definitely, especially at the start, it's important to come together until you've established a good relationship, but I think you need to meet often, work in a partnership way. Listen to your wider membership. It's not all about the people at the table, it's who you're representing, and we'll come into that a bit more. And very clearly it's about representing a wide range of voices and more, but co-production is at least those things at a minimum.
And what it isn't, don't be the angry old lady who's constantly firing off letters or ranting at counsellors. Being in a parent-carer forum and participation isn't about aggression and conflict. It isn't about talking about your own individual issues and problems, and quite often parents do get involved with the parent-carer forum because there is something that they feel is not right for them and for their families and that they feel very passionate about and want to make changes, but not just for themselves, for others. It's often your own personal experiences will bring you to be involved with the forum. But it's making sure that a parent-carer forum is not just about individual circumstance and vocal individuals. And lobbying and protesting is a really interesting one, and we were discussing this before we started the presentation. We think that obviously we don't want participation to be where you're there with your placards, as you can see in the picture at the bottom, and standing outside the local authority offices and basically making a scene, but actually sometimes lobbying strategies can be used as part of a wider, more parent participation approach, so that there's no harm in that.
And especially if you openly discuss and tell the other professionals around the table that this is what you are going to have to do to raise the profile of a particular event or something that's happened, and we've done that in the past and had a very open discussion, or you know, with our professionals around the table, that this is what we would have to do, or we knew that other groups would be doing that and we would support them to do that.
We have an example from Hampshire where we were challenging quite significant short breaks cuts, and we, over a 2-year period, worked both in co-production with the local authority to look at, well, if the budget cuts happen, what can the services look like, what can short breaks look like on that money, But we also did tell them at the same time, we're not happy with this, and we will do pretty much everything in our power to try and get you to change your mind and to understand how important this is for families. But again, we approached that in a very positive way, and we did use some lobbying as part of that participation. But we spoke to the local authority to explain why and what we were doing, and in the end it had a very positive outcome, and the cuts didn't happen. And I think, if anything, the relationship between the forum and the local authority was strengthened because of the positive approach that we took, even though at times we were using some lobbying techniques. Okay, so the benefits of participation. Participation, obviously we want it to improve outcomes for local families. It's also important to note that certainly following the Children and Families Act in 2014, it also supports local authority and health authority legal duties. And in the handouts there will be a handout that explains that. So that will be on the Contact Family website in the next week or so. Parents are really creative, and quite often when you involve parent carers in decision making or planning for particular projects, particularly when those are difficult, such as budget cuts, then parents will be often the ones who come up with the really creative solutions and different ways of thinking. And all of these things lead to better service provision for our families, better value for money. We're all taxpayers as well. We want to make sure that as many children with additional needs can get support. It's not just about our own children. And also the benefits of participation to yourself, and certainly I know this from my own individual experience of being involved in the forum, is that I certainly feel more resilient, more knowledgeable in terms of dealing with my own situation and for my own daughter, and I feel that I'm supported to do that, and overall hopefully less conflict.
Absolutely. So what is needed for effective participation? Of course, a massive culture shift. By that meaning, going back to graphics on the go, lovely cartoon, that parents and professionals both need to acknowledge that they have equal weight, importance and value around a table. You have to be willing to work together. You do need to build in time. You need to have meetings at the right time of day where you can all be available, for example. It's a really, really important thing for parent carers. You need to build up trust. If people share things in confidence with you, that you won't spread it outside that arena. You need to, and that enables you to have open and honest conversations. You do need to have a commitment to it. You can't just turn up for a meeting and never go again, or not be involved any further, because it needs all parties around the table to move something forward. You do need to be creative and to move on from difficult issues and issues and conflict where it will arise in life. And it's really helpful if you come from a robust and effective forum who are able to represent a wide range of parent views. I'm really conscious that in West Sussex in particular, we don't have a strong voice for parents who have a lot of heavy caring load, whose children have very complex medical needs, for example, simply because they're just very, very tired and not available to come to meetings and participate. But their experience and their views are really, really important, so we make an effort to proactively go out and make sure that we're as representative as possible.
Okay, so what's the purpose of the Parent Carer Forum? Grania and I prefer to do presentations where there's just pictures and no words, but we know that this PowerPoint needs to be put online and make sense to people afterwards, so we haven't got too many slides like this. But we think that actually it's quite nice sometimes to visually represent what we're trying to say. So in terms of the purpose of a Parent Carer Forum, we have a wonderful singing penguin there, which I adore, and that's to signify that it's really important that all voices are heard. And as Grania's just said, it's important that the forum is representative and can represent a wide range of voices, and that people's opinions can be heard.
The light bulb represents to improve service design and delivery to meet the local needs, of which, by listening to parents on the ground, you will probably have a different opinion coming together with professionals will inform the delivery of your local services.
Okay, the next one's, we're sort of going across the top, question everything. That's obviously quite self-explanatory, but that's saying it's important that parent carer forums are there to question and to challenge in a positive and constructive way, but to not necessarily take everything at face value that you're told, and to actually go and do some further digging and inquiring if need be, to really understand what's going on behind the scenes, and to also understand as well what parents are telling you, because again sometimes parents might come with a particular issue, but when you do some questioning you find out it's something completely different is actually the cause of the issues or their concerns. So don't take everything at face value, but to challenge and question and just think about, is there more depth that we need to go into.
The K just represents get really good outcomes for your local families to the best of your forum's ability in being effective with participation.
And then we've got networking. The purpose of the Parent Carer Forum is to represent parents' voices, but it doesn't make any sense at all to replicate work and efforts that are already out there. So it's about actually going out and identifying other groups that you can work with, support groups or schools, so that you can actually go and talk to lots of people in a really way, rather than having to go and talk to 1,000 people individually.
Yeah, networking and working together. And your lovely last cartoon of lots of governmenty, official-looking people, Sharon, is to represent regional and national initiatives and strategies to support children with SEN and or disabilities. So that's things like when the government issues a green paper, and the importance of responding and giving feedback to that. Read it carefully, understand the implications, question everything, as Einstein says up there to the right. And similarly, when it becomes a white paper or a strategy or a process, the way things are done.
Okay, so now we've told you what parent carer forums do, it's also important for us to say here what they don't do. We've already talked about campaigning and lobbying, and although at times some element of campaigning and some lobbying might be needed, the forum is not a campaigning and lobbying organisation. Excuse me, it's around participation.
And we aren't there to give individual information, advice and support. We are not an independent support. We're not independent supporters either. There are organisations that do that, and we're not an advocacy organisation for individual cases.
So we suggest really that because sometimes parents don't necessarily know what a forum is and isn't, you will get some people contacting you who want to have individual advocacy or support for a particular thing. So it's important as a forum that you know where to signpost them. So we've just put there a little action point to say where, if you get a list of signposting, maybe on your website, and you can pass people on.
And just a reminder that all forums are linked to the National Network of Parent Carer Forums. Together there's 151, 152 forums, which does have a structure, and the steering group of the National Network does meet with senior ministers at the top table, so it's really helpful to get your voice up to the top and to listen to messages which come down by regional advisors as well. So have a look at and get to know who your regional advisor is, and come to the AGM and get involved with the National Network.
Yeah, I would suggest really these images, they don't come through very clearly on this presentation because they're quite small. They were taken from the National Network of Parent Carer Forums website, so go and have a look on there. It tells you a little bit about the work that they're doing and who the people are that are involved. And in effect, the National Network Steering Committee is like your forum representing parents in your local area. They're representing the voice of all of the forums at a national level, so it's really worth getting involved with them.
So just a little example, I won't read it through it all, of what we share with parents in West Sussex. What we do, we absolutely we make a point that we are pan-disability whatever your additional need or disability is. So we are not a single issue disability charity. And just be conscious of trying to have that voice. I'm not going to read through all these examples because we've covered them before, but just towards the bottom, just a reminder that we support and represent the views of parent carers. We frequently get asked about the views of young people, and we don't represent their views. Of course, we have lots of young people, but they might be different to those of their parents. So if we do get asked by professionals a lot to get young people, that's not our primary focus and purpose. But hopefully that slide is self-explanatory.
Yeah, and this slide here is taken from a document that West Sussex Forum give to parents, and we will put a copy of that again with the downloads available with this PowerPoint, so that you can see how they explain what they do as a forum to local parents when they want to get involved. Okay, so these are just some factors that contribute to having an effective forum. It's really important that you have a clear vision and strategy, and that you know the purpose of your forum and why you exist and what you're trying to do. If you don't know that, it's really hard then when you speak to parents to explain what you do. Or you might have 5 different people meeting with parents all saying completely different things about what the forum does and where you're going. Good governance structures. It's really useful to have elections so that people are nominated onto the committee, mainly because that's actually how local authorities work, and they understand if you have an election and you are actually representing parents of your local area, then you have more of a mandate and more of a voice in their eyes than a self-elected group of parents. Some of the other things on here are just common sense really about making sure that there's open communication, delegated responsibilities, not 1 or 2 people doing everything for the forum, because then you have the risk of burnout and them leaving and taking all of the knowledge and information with them. And we've already talked about needing that strong reach and making sure that you are representing a wide range of voices and you're involved with a wide range of initiatives with the local authority. No, we've put it 3 times, feedback, feedback, feedback. It's important that when parents are representing the forum, that they feed back to the forum about meetings they've attended, but actually what's also really, really important is that parents who have provided input to the forum then understand where their feedback has gone and what difference it has made. The one way to attract people to be more involved in the work you're doing is to demonstrate to them that the things they have done and said to you have been represented, and then actually outcomes have been improved. And at the bottom there, and really this picture shows that as well, as I said, we like our pictures, it's a commitment to working together to make a difference for your local families. Okay, so back to pictures.
It's helpful, and it is a very confusing world when you're all very new to the world of a forum, to understand how your local authority works, who's who, how departments relate to each other. This also works across health, of course. You know, what work streams are going on, what's strategic, what's not. So spend some time to understand or explain to people new to this, to the world of parent care forums, how it all works at that level.
The next one, in fact I'm going to do the next 2. So there's a little girl on the phone, and then there's the name badge with the influencer on it. It's really important for you to understand who your key contacts are and to make contact with them. So pick up the phone and speak to people and try and find out who in the organisation you need to speak to. Identify your decision makers, because obviously they're the ones who are making the decisions, but also identify who can influence those decisions and who are the decision makers actually listening to when they're making those decisions, and build relationships with those people. So basically try and cherry pick, because we have limited time in a parent care forum, so it's best to spend that time with the people that really are going to make the most difference for families.
And we all come with gifts, strengths and talents, so it's about working together to reach the best outcomes, which is the 2 little children making a cake.
And then we've got, again, it's some networking. This is about working with other organisations. Parent care forums can't be everywhere at once because we have limited capacity. And also there are some work streams and boards that maybe we can't necessarily get a place around the table. So it's understanding and identifying and then working with other organisations that maybe do have a seat at that table. So for instance, Health Watch is one example. Quite often they can be on a health and wellbeing board when parent care forums can't get representation there.
And the ear and the chemical solutions are just about making sure that you are listening to parents who don't sit on your management structure or your steering group, but you're listening to people on the ground, to parents and families on the ground, and it's about coming up with creative solutions with local authority and health, being proactive about that.
So it's important that we see the whole picture, and individual stories are just one piece of that picture, but they provide us with some really valuable evidence. So what we've just put here is a list of ways of securing some of those stories and then being able to pull those together. The forum's role is to pull those together into one picture and then present that to the local authority or health as an evidence-based proposal.
So nobody wants to work with people that whine all the time. It's just a reminder to try and be solution focused. It's not all rosy, of course, but whining is not the best way to work with people who make friends in local authority and health.
Okay, so the next few slides we're going to have to go through reasonably quickly, just purely because of time, but we wanted to make sure we put them in. So we advise you just to come back and read these at your leisure when the PowerPoint is put up. But what we wanted to talk about here was about strategy groups and understanding really that the local authority and health will have a number of work streams and strategy groups that parent carers can get involved with. And it's important to understand which ones exist and then try and identify how can the forum engage with that and get involved at the earliest stage.
And it's just really understanding you can be working as hard as you can on the ground, but unless there's a strategy, something that's coming from top down won't make any difference. You won't be changing or embedding change or a new culture while you're working. So it's your voice at the top table, your voice at implementing a strategy that will have a much, much longer lasting effect for families and parent carers where you live.
So some of the things really to consider is to, once you've identified that there is a strategy group and you've managed to get an invitation, hopefully, to be involved, is to understand really what is the purpose and the role of that meeting, to make sure that whoever your parent representatives are who are going along understand what their role is going to be, how they can be involved and what they can influence, because there are some groups that you'll be on where actually it's more about that information stage rather than co-production. And obviously we all constantly push for the co-production way of working, but there are occasions when we can't do that. So it's important to agree in advance what roles parents are going to play. Are they just sitting on a particular committee or work stream, or could they potentially chair that or be a deputy chair of that? Understand as well what issues might arise from the meeting, and also think about who might be the best parent representatives to go along and their own personal circumstances. If something's going to be particularly contentious and you know that a family has had a negative experience, they might not be the best people to go along to that. And also consider having 2 or more people involved to make sure that you have that range of voices that are going to be represented. And then the last thing is really just say, obviously we want our parent representatives to provide feedback to the forum, make it as easy as possible rather than a 4-page long document that they have to fill in once they've got home. Sometimes these meetings can be quite emotional and draining, and then you come home and you think, oh, I've got to fill in a 2-page feedback form now. So just make that as easy as possible.
So absolutely, your role as a parent rep is to attend meetings of local authority and health organisations to represent the views of parent carers, that wider view of parent carers, so not just about your own personal experience, using evidence to support your position. So just be really strong about your evidence and make sure you understand the whole picture about that. And sometimes you can present that in surveys. It depends how you present it depending on your time and your skills in your forum. Your role is to engage in discussion and decision making. Your role is absolutely to improve outcomes for local families, and it's really important, as Sharon said, to provide feedback. Otherwise you're just a person working on your own. You're just somebody trying your best to change things locally, but we are way more effective as a collective voice of all disabilities, and that's why feedback is so important to keep that momentum going.
So again, this slide I think is one that you can look at outside of this presentation, but it's important that parent representatives are supported when they get involved with your forum. And some of the examples of ways to do that would be a remuneration policy for their time and their expenses, and making sure that they have all of the background information provided in advance to them. There is a form that we have as one of the handouts, which is a parent rep request form, which can be given to the local authority or health, where they fill in information about the meeting, and then the information can be passed on to the parent representative who's going to be involved, so that they can actually understand who the contact details are, the decision makers, the influencers, what the purpose of the group is, how the group fits into that overall strategy that the local authority has, where on that organisational chart it is. Other things, practical things to support parent reps include induction packs, buddying, making sure that experienced parent reps go along with less experienced people for the first time, ease of sharing documents, so consider things such as online document sharing where everybody can upload documents, and lots of face-to-face meetings really, because actually that's where ideas are generated and where relationships are built, and that's where the creativity comes from.
And of course not everybody wants to be big important strategic meetings sitting on boards, but just an acknowledgement that there's lots of different ways to get involved that are really valuable. You know, you can complete surveys, attend focus groups, provide information, make cups of tea, go to other coffee mornings with other support groups. Lots and lots of different ways of involving parents, so it's not all about sitting at the top table, but everything that everybody does as a collective will get fed back to the people who are there sitting at those strategic meetings.
So these are just a few principles really, and this document here, this page, is really for you to hand to anybody who, for you to copy and adapt for anybody who's going to be a parent rep for you. And you may want to build it into a code of conduct type document, and again there's a sample of one of those on Contact to Family's website. It's important that when people are going along to meetings on behalf of the forum that they're representing that wider viewpoint. We've talked about this over and over again in this presentation. Confidentiality, it's really important that parents understand when there's confidential items and that they don't share that information outside of the meetings they're attending. And if they're not sure, just ask them to ask the chair of the meeting, is this information that's confidential? Am I allowed to share this with the committee? Am I allowed to share this with a wider parent group? And professional parent, this is a unique role. Only really people who are there representing parent carers have this role. It's important to act professionally but not lose sense of who you are and the fact that you are representing views of families and you're not part of the establishment. So when you're there, be yourself, be real, and at times it can be emotional, and it doesn't mean you're being unprofessional if you're putting over something that at times can be quite emotive, and actually that can have quite a lot of impact. And then the last one we've already covered really is presenting solutions, not just problems. And if during a meeting you can't come up with an immediate solution, say, well, we'll take that away in the forum, we'll go and discuss and come back with some ideas as to how we can help and how we can come back and work with you.
And obviously it's about attending meetings. There's the whole thing about preparing in advance, understanding who's who, what's expected of you from that meeting. Providing evidence, it's not just stories that you've heard, you know, does it have substance, are they real? Speaking clearly, listen carefully, speak up if you disagree, don't be frightened, but obviously do it politely, And just don't be afraid to ask. There's a lot of jargon sometimes, there's a lot of processes, but just remember, fundamentally, we're just parents.
Okay, so when I talked about being professional, being that professional parent, these are some of the things that add to a professional approach when attending a meeting. As I said, it's really important that you don't lose yourself and you don't become part of the establishment, but also these are things that will actually help you engage in those meetings and be more effective in representing parents' views when you're there. So preparation in advance. The more that you're prepared and you know what the meeting's about, what's going to be discussed, you've read the papers, you've got your evidence, the more effective you're going to be in that meeting. Be punctual. If you can't attend, then that's absolutely fine. You can let your forum know and they might be able to find somebody else who can attend in your place. But if you just can't attend, it's last minute. We all have children who have additional needs, and quite often, therefore, they might be sick or have appointments that we suddenly come up at the last minute that you can't get out of. And likewise, if you're going to be late or you need to leave early. So it's just polite, really, to tell people about that.
And I think the rest, Sharon, is quite self-evident. It's about staying focused and on the agenda, maybe writing a list of any other business items that you need to raise at the end. Keep to the point, don't dominate the meeting and take up everyone's time. It's about listening to other people's views and having respect and just being really civil, remaining calm and polite. Abide by the decisions made, whether you agree or not, but there is a point in which you can have your say and just make it really clear that the forum doesn't necessarily agree with the decision that might have been made. We talked about a little bit about that, about campaigning and lobbying at the start. Following up on any action points you agreed that the forum would carry out, really, really important, helps that good working relationship with the other professionals around the table. And providing feedback for the forum after the meeting, really essential, especially if you can't go to any other meetings. But it's about that collective team working. It's not just being there as an individual parent on their own.
Yeah, I think the point about abiding by decisions made, whether you agree or not, particularly relates to when you're representing the forum, because it can be that as a parent representative you're taking the forum's position on something and it might not be necessarily your own personal viewpoint, but if the forum committee or the parent representatives have decided that that is what the forum want to present and want to say, then that needs to be a consistent message that's coming out of the forum. And if you feel then that because you disagree so strongly with it that you can't represent that viewpoint or abide by it, then it's best to put your hand up and say that and get somebody else to do it instead.
And everything that we've just talked about is summed up really beautifully in this lovely 6-minute short video. The Parable of the Blobs and Squares was shown to us in the forum by a professional in West Sussex, and it sums up everything we've talked about. It's about that developing a relationship, and actually, as a member of the Parent Carer Forum, when you're sitting around a table, not to become too professional. Don't lose your parentiness. So sums up everything we've talked about. I urge you to go and watch it. It's 6 minutes. And Sharon said at the beginning that the most important assets of any forum are you yourself. It's us, it's parents and other reps. Just the importance of being a parent of a child or young person with an additional need or disability. It's a unique parenting journey. There's a document, there's a handout that goes with this. It all goes into lots of details about it, which there's lots of reading and some helpful strategies. But the importance of looking after yourself and your fellow parent reps cannot be stressed enough, especially in the very difficult, sometimes public arena of strategic participation.
And that's about us all being honest with each other, I think, at times. And if you're finding something is particularly difficult or personal to you, actually letting others within the forum know that, and then possibly at times stepping back as well and saying, at the moment, this isn't right for me to be involved. And we talked about how there's lots of different ways for parents to get involved with the forum, and it might be say, I can't be a parent representative at this time, I have too much going on in my life, I need to step back. but then it's also about the rest of the forum making sure that you're okay and looking out for each other, because quite often working as part of a parent forum can be quite stressful and quite emotive and quite draining and time consuming, so it's important that we're all looking out for each other.
And the uniqueness of our parent carer journey and the roles that we perform in parenting our child with additional need is actually what brings us all together, which makes us a very powerful parent disability voice. There's a lovely exercise, and there's another resource which will come out at the end of this presentation. It's about acknowledging that we have a lot of caring, very diverse, and no matter the complexities or the dynamics of your family or of your child or young person, we all do these things. So it's just acknowledging and being honest, as Sharon said. How many hats do you wear? When things are difficult for you, just giving a shout out. This is a team, after all.
Okay, and I love this quote. I think it's, obviously one of the most successful bands in the world. It's about wanting to say here with this slide, really just to summarise everything that we've said today. The key to parent participation is working together. It's using everybody's gifts and talents and coming together and trying to see how the best outcomes can actually be arrived at. And I think for me it's the line, they balanced each other and the total was greater than the sum of parts. Parent carers are very different to local authorities and health bodies. We have a completely different viewpoint at times. We have different constraints on our lives, different priorities, but actually we can balance, when we come together, we can balance each other out, and we can make sure that we actually come up with some really creative and innovative solutions that create those great things, and basically it's working together as a team.
And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. Sorry it was very rushed, but lots of information to come out after this handout.
We're just going to have a look now and see if we've got any questions that have come through. If we don't have time to answer them all, then we will put them on a question and answer sheet, basically along with all of the handouts. There are lots of handouts that will come out alongside this webinar. But also you can contact myself or Grania as well if there's something in particular that you want to speak to us about. So as Grania said, she's from West Sussex Parent Care Forum. So I have one question here that's come through which says, what if you feel your local authority see you as a tick box and don't appear to listen?
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay. Very difficult. So what we've done locally, just gone back to basics and started again and called it out. It depends what the issue is. That's a very generic question. It happens often, actually, over lots of different issues, and we feel as if we're just fulfilling a function that they need to comply with in the process. So we sit down at the table with them and we call it out. We tell them how we feel. We feel as if we're just being a tick box and we're being used.
Absolutely. I think it's really important to say that, and that comes back to the fact that one of the purposes of the forum is to challenge, and part of that challenge can be you're not actually doing this properly, and it's reminding them, and we'll have a handout that will help you with this, that it is actually in the legislation now, it's in the Children and Families Act, that they have to do this. It's not an option anymore. In the last 2 years it's something that they have a legal duty to do. And that doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it's an easy conversation to have. And sometimes it is about actually just really challenging them.
And sometimes when your relationship with a local authority is very new and they don't really know you very well, sometimes that's born out of misunderstanding. They don't really understand what you're there for. It's quite complicated to somebody that works in a structure like a local authority sometimes. They're not just a support group. We often get confused by that as well. Can you go and find out the answers for families with this particular condition? And that's not our main focus, our main function. So it's actually just going back to basics and just reminding them, and they're very polite. Face-to-face is often the best way doing that. What we're really there for?
I think as well it's a similar question as to when parent carers don't really understand what the forum does either. And one of the best ways to help parents understand what the forum's there for is to actually have participation in practice, so where parents can actually get involved and they can see what participation is and how it can make a difference to them. And I think the same applies actually to the local authority as well, and to health, is to actually say, talk to us about some of the issues you're having at the moment. What are the problems you're facing? So I can't imagine there are many SEN departments that haven't had lots of angry and irate parents phoning up around EHCPs and the transition from statements. So, okay, let's pick an area that you are having a problem with parents with. Let's unpick those particular things together, and we will show you the value that we can give. And I think sometimes then, once you do that and you actually make their lives easier in some way, or you save them money, which always makes the local authority obviously happy, then they'll realise that actually working with the forum is something that will make their role easier, their lives easier, and will actually be of benefit. So just give us an opportunity to work on one project where we can really demonstrate the value that we can show you and that we can deliver, and how parents can make a difference.
And that's really powerful, Sharon. Instead of just complaining, you know, we don't do that, we feel like a tick box exercise, is to go back with a solution. We feel a bit underused in this way, but this is what we could do that will be different, that we would feel happy with on our terms, and this is what you will get as a result of us working in a different way. And being solution focused all the time and calling it out, being honest and transparent, and developing a good relationship with people is a really good way to go forward. Oh, another question.
Yeah, we've got two more. How do you recommend we find out where the strategic meetings are and who with, especially if the local authority is not overly compliant? It's about picking up the phone, looking at, actually one of the top tips I would say is look on the website for the local authority and read the minutes for their council meetings, because quite often they will, any of these strategic meetings and these work streams have to go to the councillors for final decisions, and so you can start to see some patterns, or they will mention about I don't know, a particular service or a particular budget is going to be cut, and there's going to be a strategic group formed as a result of that. So you can sometimes pick up things in council meeting minutes, but otherwise it is about understanding that wider picture of what's happening in national legislation. Reading newspapers sometimes, it can be, or newsletters that the council put out.
And where you've written, especially if the local authority is not overly compliant, for us in West Sussex what we've done is actually just go back to the law, go back to what is compliant, what does good look like, and sometimes if you're not getting any joy by people that are implementing that uncompliant process, going to the top, you know, find out who their boss's boss are. Obviously, lots of diplomacy, do it very professionally, and certainly it's not about making a complaint about a person, it's just reminding them that they're not compliant in certain areas in the nicest possible way, yeah. And that's worked very well in West Sussex for us.
And I think it is as well about finding out who your allies are and who the influencers are internally, because if you can build relationships with those people, they're going to tell you when there's work streams and strategy groups, because if you can get people within the organisation who believe in what you're doing, and you can have, even if it's just one or two people in the local authority or health who actually see the value in your organisation, then basically tap into them as a resource and say what else is going on, because they potentially can find out things that we can't. We've got one further question, which is just saying, somebody's asked about the link to the handout. All of the handouts and a copy of this presentation will be put onto the Contact a Family website sometime in the next 7 to 10 days. We just need to collate all the handouts and make sure that we have covered any of the questions from today. a link will be sent out on email to everybody who has signed up for this webinar. So you will receive an email from Contact Family.
And thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your time. And if there are any further questions, if you contact Contact Family, we will endeavour to answer them as well. Thank you. Bye-bye.